Okay, so I was just talking to Jodi, our co-host, guest speaker. The format today is going to be in the chat. I'm going to put a list of questions. I don't know if I put them in there. Can everyone see them? Anti-fragility questions. Are they there? Can you see all of them?
In the chat.
Is it? Yes?
Not yet.
No?
I think
No.
if you put them in before we came in, yeah. Okay.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I've got them now. Oh, it's a Word document.
Can you open that, or is that a problem?
No, I can open it. That's fine.
Okay. The reason I've put this list of questions is because I want to give the talk today that we're going to have with Jodi some sort of frame, like a framework. Because in the past, what we've done, we've had interesting conversations, but they've been very sort of general and open. Whereas here, since Jodi's got so many different points that we can talk on, it would give her some a better direction as well on how to have this talk. And so if you have any questions, any insights, anything that you want to discuss, put them in the chat. And what we'll do is at the end, around about 10 minutes, 15 minutes from the end, we'll stop and then we'll look at the questions. So this gives Jodi a chance to actually get into the flow and start talking about the book and a lot of things. She's a woman, she's done so much in her life that we got to give her the stage and some space to actually share the journey with us. So you've all got the questions there. Let me just admit someone else into the... So what happens? Do people get the questions if they... I mean, people are coming in. Will they get the questions or not? Do I have to keep putting in all the time?
I think you'll have to launch it again for people that come in afterwards, which is a bit of a pain, I agree.
Because I put it in, but as people are coming in now, it's 5 past the hour. I'm going to have to put it back in again. Okay, here it is. Okay, that's it. It's in there now. So whoever comes in after this can actually ask.
They'll have to ask, yeah.
Whatever. So anyway, welcome everyone. Welcome to the BEwell Hub Series, a space dedicated to uncovering insights, tackling difficulties, and celebrating successes from our life journeys. My name is Gary Marcus Judge, and I will be your host, along with Jodi O Brown. The BEwell get-togethers are designed to support, share, and inspire. And today, we really have an inspirational speaker. Our guest speaker today is Jodi O Brown. Jodi works as an interactional leadership and resilience expert. She is the author of 4 books, motivational speaker, brain tumor survivor, and a mother of 4. So I don't know which was the most difficult ones. I put the mother of 4 at the end, but probably it could have gone to the first one as well, I can imagine. So our talk today is entitled The Antifragile Mindset, Building Strength and Resilience from Life's Challenges. So welcome, Jodi. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about your journey. About look at those questions. I mean, look at the. You're right. Let's look at the questions and go through the questions so that way we all have some framework to actually follow on this talk. So the first question is, can we open that? The first question is, how do you define anti-fragility? And how does it differ from resilience?
That is a great place to start, because especially when COVID hit and the pandemic started to shut down all of life, over and over again in the news, you saw all about how we need to become more resilient. We need to become more resilient, and we need more resilient kids. But the reality is we need to be more than resilient. We need to be anti-fragile. And anti-fragility is a term that was coined by a man named Nassim Taleb. And he says that anti-fragile, it's a property of systems that increase in response to stressors, volatility, mistakes, and challenges. Whereas resilience is bouncing back to as good as you were before, anti-fragile is the concept of actually getting better. using the challenges to learn, to grow, and to advance in what you are doing. Initially, he talks about this concept in terms of large organizations, systems, economies, software, so that rather than when a software crashes, it can be smart and it can learn and it can get better and change along the way. And I just kept waiting, like, when does it apply to me? When is he going to tell me how to be anti-fragile? And it never quite got to that personal level. And so I just took his principles and started applying them in my business, in my work, and in my life. And that's how I really just caught on to this whole thing that we can live anti-fragile lives and lead anti-fragile teams and organizations and become better from the challenges all around us.
Yeah. Because I think it's a new concept. It's a new concept. It's just maybe they've just coined the word anti-fragile. I think everyone's talking about resilience and being resilient, but here we're talking about something different. We're not just talking about adapting, but we're talking actually, is this sort of looking for obstacles, to grow? Is that what this is about? Anti-fragile mindset?
Yes, but it's also taking the things that you're not looking for, the things that just hit you, that come to life as part of the ups and downs of business and life. And instead of being thrown off course by those, instead finding ways to become better, to become stronger, to adapt yourself in your business so that you can grow.
Okay. Let's look at the second one. The second question here is from, again, everyone's got the list of questions there. Okay, so if there are any thoughts, any questions, any insights that you have, put them in the chat, and then later on we'll stop and we'll go look at those questions and ask Jodi for some more, a deeper explanation on that. The second question is from strategist to survivor. From strategist to survivor. It's about, could you share with us your journey from strategist to survivor? What did this experience teach you about personal strength and growth?
Well, how long do we have here?
Just some...
I was living what I deemed to be my white picket fence life. Everything was perfect. I was mother of 4 children, married to my best friend. Life was going well. I had honestly checked all of the boxes of the goals in my life that I wanted to achieve. I had married my best friend. I had my kids. We were living in a beautiful neighborhood. I was a nonprofit executive running a charitable organization and doing good in the community. And I had earned the degrees that I had wanted. I have a master's degree in organizational communication and leadership. I felt I was doing everything to make a difference. And then I started having some symptoms. And over the course of several months, we realized that there was a real problem. And I was eventually diagnosed with a tumor that wrapped around my brainstem. And that changed every area of my life and every relationship and everything that I knew. And all of a sudden, all of those things that were perfectly lined up in my life felt like they were thrown into a tornado, whipped around at F5 speeds, and just jumped back into a messy pile. And I went from being what I call on the giving side of life, where I was the one organizing the charitable events and giving back grants to people and organizations that needed them, to all of a sudden being on the receiving end, where people had to come in and take care of me. And I was vulnerable and I was in the hospital. And I was initially deemed to be inoperable by an entire healthcare system. Through a series of miracles, we were able to find a doctor who agreed to operate. And so I went into the hospital for what was supposed to be 1 surgery and 5 to 6 days in the hospital. And that turned into 3 craniotomies, 35 days in neurocritical care, a spinal fluid leak, a brain infection, pneumocephalus, facial paralysis, and lost my hearing. And as you can imagine, I was placed in a situation where I literally had to just hold on to survive. And all of the extra things in my life that I had been doing for others, everything was gone. And it was just literally holding on so I could keep myself alive. And when I finally got out of the hospital, I realized that I was a changed person, that one door in my life had closed and another door had opened. As much as I wanted to go back to that normal life, that was gone, because I was left with all of these deficits and side effects. And so what started as that one surgery, as of 2 weeks ago today, we are up to now 24 surgeries to keep my body functioning so that I can do what my body used to do on its own, but no longer does. And in the process of all of this, I found that I learned lessons along the way. The first time I went through something was very, very difficult. But if I looked back and examined and analyzed, then I was able to be more prepared the next time. And I was a little bit stronger, and I was a little bit more ready for something when it hit the second time. And so really my process of being resilient and becoming anti-fragile was taking what was thrown at me, and then as I experienced it and looked back on it, learning lessons and applying those lessons for the future.
It's so subjective, this story here. I'm sure, it's really touching for every one of us here, but we're also trying to look at it from the objective point of view, and how we can extract some of your strength and resilience, and how we can use it, or we can use it with our coaches or with our clients. So you talk about strategy as in all that you succumbed, all that you endured, that you actually started using that as a plan to how to overcome future obstacles. Is that right?
You actually figure out a little bit that you can tell the future. Not totally. You don't know what's going to happen. You can't always predict, but you know, based on things that have happened in the past, what you can expect and maybe what you shouldn't expect. And so then you can prepare better. So I had situations where, okay, things didn't go right in this surgery, and I realized what I needed, what I should have done, but I wasn't prepared for. Well, so guess what? Next time I went into surgery, you better believe that I was more prepared. You better believe that I had a different plan, that I had made different adjustments. When I went into the hospital for the first time, I had a 1-week calendar that I left for family and friends to take care of my home and my kids and my household. 1 week. And I ended up being in the hospital for over 5 weeks. Obviously, that was not sufficient. And so going forward, I realized things take more time. We all have learned that. Any house project that you do means you need to double or triple your expectations for the time, as well as the number of trips you're going to need to take to the home improvement store to get your supplies, and the obstacles that are going to come up that you weren't planning on. So the more that you can anticipate, the more that you can learn from what's happened in the past, the better you can anticipate and be prepared for the future.
Yeah. I've just listened to you on your path. It's like when we think our businesses or our professional life is the most important things, where we give all the energy and time and effort and so on, until something serious happens. And then when it's life and death, it's like,
It also allows you to prepare better, and you can say, because of this, now I know to do this. And that is what anti-fragile is. It is taking something that could have destroyed you and instead becoming stronger because of it. I think of it like the human immune system, that when it's fighting off something, you get those antibodies in your system that fight off any foreign invaders. And next time that those foreign invaders come in and that illness tries to get you, your body recognizes it, it puts up the defenses, and then you're actually stronger and you can handle it. And you don't get sick the second time around, because you've learned how to adapt and how to increase your system.
Okay. Does anyone want a question while we're here? I mean, does anyone have anything they want to share? Martin, you got something? I was gonna leave it at the end, but I think it's such an interesting conversation. Perhaps some of us have got some stories to share. Martin, what's yours?
No, it wasn't sharing a story. Firstly, hi, Jodi. Nice to see you. I've been touched by people, you know, they've had their lives turned upside down, etc. You know, it's not a personal experience of mine, but I have friends, and it was interesting that their overwhelming emotion as part of this turning up was anger. Mm. And they just could not get this. You know, it was really, they were very angry people, very angry about the whole situation. Everything had been turned upside down. It was nothing what they expected, and they had to reinvent their lives. But it was motivated by anger, which was, and I mean, this is their words, you know, this is what they said. I just wondered if that was something you shared, or did you find yourself sort of more in the sort of idea that, you know, I'm going to change my life around come what may, as a resilient thing rather than being an emotional response?
I think you go through all of the above. There are moments of anger. There are times where you decide, I'm going to come forward and be the conqueror. And if you had known me before, I'm a get her done girl. I'm a conquer the world kind of girl. So I went into this thinking, I'm going to come out of this better and stronger. I was so naive. I didn't have a clue of how hard this journey was really going to be. But I did consciously make some decisions early on, which was that I was going to try to look for and see the good things and the miracles and the positive things that were happening around me. I have a good friend who was in a similar situation with a cancer battle, and she became very, very bitter and angry. And like some of the people that you're talking about, that can become a way of life. Yeah. And I had a conversation with her, and I brought one of my young kids with me. We were going on a walk around the neighborhood, and I stopped by her house, and we left. And my young son said, "Oh, I was glad to get out of there, Mom." Like, he could feel it. He could feel what it had done to her. And I looked at him and I said, you know what? You always have a choice. You can choose to be bitter, or you can choose to be better.
There you go. Yeah,
Totally
well,
up to you.
That was that's the message that you know, you feel that you have to, as a, you know, an observer, put over. But it must be very, very difficult. Well, I know it's very difficult. You know, it's taken, in this particular example, probably 10 years.
I am now 15 years out. I thought this was going to be a go in and get it taken care of and move on, and that it's been the opposite. Instead of being able to move on, it's been a game changer. It's changed the path that I was on. And literally, I don't have the life I had before. I have a new life. I have a different life. And it's been that process of reinvention, of discovering purpose in who I am now and what I can do, and also realizing what I can't do. And that was very hard in the beginning, to realize I had to let go of so many things that I loved and that had been ingrained in who I thought that I was, and having to let go of things because I could no longer, my physical body could no longer do them. But that's also been part of the growth process, is discovering new things. I used to be a huge water person. I love to swim, and I love to be in the ocean. I love to do everything in the water. Well, I can't do that anymore because I can't pop my ears. My eustachian tube was sealed, and I cannot pop my ears, which means I can't go under the water. It means I have difficulty going up mountains because I cannot adjust. So rather than being under the water, now I have discovered I love to kayak. I love to paddleboard. I love to be on top of the water as much as I love to be under the water. But there really came that point in time where I had to let go and say, okay, I can't be upset anymore that I can no longer do these things. Not only do I need to accept them, I need to find positive things to replace them so that I can fill what could have been a hole in my life, and instead have it be filled with something positive and enjoyable. And I've had to do the same thing in my business life. I totally switched careers. And really it gave me an opportunity. That's the difference, is you can see that it took away your life, or you can see that you've been given opportunities to do things differently.
Well, that's what I would define as anti-fragile. you've taken that, and it's not broken. You've gone out there. It's a different life. You've moved on. It's a message, a very strong message. And I think I brought it up mainly because I think I kind of half guessed it was a long journey, this, and it wasn't just a few months. I mean, I know in your intro, so the fact that it was 15 years is a real eye opener for people, how they can transition and how you can move forward. I presume this is what the book's about. So you've put all your energy into that. So
that's the next question, Martin. 1 minute.
Oh, is it? Sorry.
let Stephen's got his hand up. Stephen, you've got a...
So, well, my question was, thank you, Jodi, for your vulnerability and sharing. And, when we go through the difficulties in life, I was just curious if you had on the physical side, if you had kind of a shift in your in the neural pathways and in the way that you think, the way that you perceive the world, and then maybe a little bit of a discussion, if you could just share a little bit about what that moment was when you first noticed the big change. And then the second thing is on the spiritual side is what opened up for you when you shifted perspective, when you surrendered or accepted or whatever you want to call it, when you had that shift of experience. So those two questions, one's physical, what was your physical awakening or shift, and what was the spiritual awakening?
Beautiful, beautiful questions. Physically, it happened pretty early on. When I was in the hospital, even though I was in neurocritical care, no one treated me differently. It's literally their jobs to treat me with as much care and respect as they can. And even people coming to visit knew the challenge and the battle that I was facing. And so I didn't get treated any differently than any other person, despite the fact that my head was shaved. I had staples all over. My eye would not close. It was wide open. I had my face was paralyzed. I had no movement on the side of the face. I couldn't hold food and fluids in my mouth. I was literally dripping and drooling, and yet I was in a cocoon. I was in a protected bubble and could not see the impact of that while I was in the hospital. And when I got out of the hospital, my mother came and lived at our house to take care of my kids and then to help take care of me as well, so my husband could still go to work. And I remember the first day we had to go somewhere, and she said, "Why don't you come with me? We'll just go to the store. We'll get some of the things that you need, and that'll get you out. It'll help build your strength." And we went to a pharmacy to go get some supplies. And I remember at that point in time, I could hardly walk. I was down to 89 pounds. I was incredibly small and weak, and was holding on to the cart just to balance myself and be able to put one foot in front of the other. And yet I was young and otherwise would have been very healthy. And I remember walking into the store, and a young, handsome young gentleman looked over at me and immediately did a double take. And he looked back and stared and started following me as I walked in. And you could clearly see the look on his eyes of, whoa, something is really wrong with that woman. And that was a defining moment for me, because it was the first time I had the chance to see someone else's reaction to my new life. And it was painful on the one hand, and on the other hand, provided me with an opportunity. And what you see now is far better than where I was. Part of the surgeries have been to do what's called facial reanimation, where this muscle right here is actually my thigh muscle. They transplanted a muscle from my thigh and a nerve from my ankle and put it in my face, because otherwise I had no ability to move this side of my face. And so now, well, you can see that I have the ability to smile. I can hold my lips together. I can hold food and fluid in my mouth, and I can even kiss my husband again. Like, that is big.
Yeah.
But what I realized in that moment of the physical is, okay, I am different. I am changed. People are going to look at me differently from this point forward. I also realized I am now memorable. The things that made me different also made me memorable. I decided in that moment, and in some future moments as well, if I'm going to be memorable, let's be memorable for the right reasons. Let's give them something positive, something to uplift their lives, so that going forward, they don't look at me and feel sorry for me. They look at me and say, wow, I want to be more like that. Or if she can do that, then I can handle the challenges in my life. And I have since realized it's what I now call a super perspective. It's an incredible perspective I never could have gained in any other way. It's one of my superpowers. Is people remember me because I look different, because I can't do all of the things in the ways that they can. And therein lies the opportunity. And that's part of the challenge, is find the things in your life where you have an opportunity and make them memorable for the right reasons.
That's a great answer there. I was talking about the physicality. Matthew's got his hand up, but just quickly, Jodi, Stephen also mentioned the spirituality. What happened there? Did you come more in touch with your inner self, or with something deeper than what you had been?
I have always been a spiritual, faithful person. That's been part of my life since I was young. I will say, back to Martin's earlier question about anger and being angry, when I was very first diagnosed, I admit there was a time where I don't know if it was anger as much as it was confusion, as I just did not know what to say to God anymore. Even though I am a super faithful person, and it's just been part of my life, I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know what it was okay to ask for. Was it okay to ask for a miracle? Was it okay to question why I was going through what I was going through? I wasn't sure what was even okay to ask for, what was okay to say. Was it okay to be mad? I just had so much going on. I just couldn't figure it out. And right about the time that I was going into the hospital for the surgeries, I realized I don't have time. I don't have time to question. I don't have time to not be spiritual. I am literally going into a fight for my life, and I need God on my side. And so I reinstituted my prayers. I reinstituted everything that maybe temporarily got thrown out the window. And not only did I start doing all of those things again, I started pleading and saying, help me, help me. And as these miracles occurred, even amidst all of the struggles as well, there came a point about 4 weeks into my hospital stay where things were starting to go a little bit better. And the thought occurred to me that I was actually going to live. I was going to make it through this. And I didn't say a prayer as much as had a conversation in my mind with the higher power and said, okay, if I'm going to live, what am I supposed to do with my life? And I didn't know the answer to that right away. But I promised that whatever he brought into my heart and my mind, that I would do, because he gave me a second chance at life. And I did not want to waste that second chance. And from that point forward, I stopped questioning when opportunities came. I didn't say, oh, do I have time? Should I do this? I thought, I was very prayerful and very faithful and meditative about it. And if it felt like it was an invitation from the right source, then I said yes. And that has allowed me to remain faithful, to be grateful to God instead of becoming bitter and being angry and losing my faith. It's allowed me to draw closer to him, because essentially I said, not what my will be done, but thine.
Okay. Thanks, Jodi. Matthew's got a question. Matthew, you got your hand up?
Yeah, inspiring story. As you know, a lot of coaches get into coaching to help people, and a lot of coaches get into coaching because they've faced burnout and they know the stupid things that they could have stopped doing before getting into that. And my question is, do you now inspire people when you speak to them that they might realize, shit, what am I doing with my life? Kind of stuff. And that's a power that is very difficult to try and convince somebody that what they're doing could lead to burnout, mental stress, and all that kind of stuff. And having that power to be able to influence somebody to think and convince themselves this needs to change. Because the biggest challenge for coaches is just trying, like I know loads of people around me in my locality that are really struggling, but they're too stubborn to engage and to let me help them. Or they won't give me any money to help them, one or the two.
That's true too. I think you hit on the answer with part of your question, because you said, how do you convince them that they need to change? And the reality is we can't convince anyone to do anything, but we can hopefully help them convince themselves that they need to change. And only when they have the right motivation will they really change their behavior. And interestingly, the word motivation comes from a few separate Latin words, and one of them is reason, and the other part of the word is to act. So if your reason to act is strong enough, then you can do just about anything, including changing the way that you do things. And that's part of what I try to do, is I try through being vulnerable and telling some of my own frailties and fears and struggles, I try to help them see their reasons so that they can choose to act differently. Because I can't make them do anything. I can't convince them of anything. But if that motivation, that underlying reason is strong enough, then you can get just about anyone to do just about anything. And hopefully they can see at that point in time that it's in their own best interest to make some changes, even if they were resistant to it before. So if you can unlock that door and let them go deep and vulnerable within themselves, the reality is they already know, they just don't want to face it.
We just need to be
Until they're willing to make a change, they're never going to make that change. But when they finally come to the point where the reason is big enough, then they can go within themselves and say, okay, now I can act differently because I understand what I really need to do.
I think what you said there is when it gets big enough. That's the wrong time to start acting. But maybe people, when they hear you speak and get that motivation, it will inspire them to maybe act a little bit before the fan gets too brown, that they'll
act. Yes. And I tell them, don't wait until you're dying in a hospital to make some of these changes. You have the chance right now. And if they already had something in their heart or on their mind of something they needed to do, that can often be the impetus to say, who knows what's going to happen? Tomorrow, I could be the one in the hospital. Tomorrow, my life could be flipped upside down. I'm not going to wait to make the change. And then that can be the reason or the seed that they decide, okay, it's time to make that change. And so you're right, Matthew. Sometimes people don't make changes until it's almost a little bit too late. But if you can inspire them, then that can actually help them transform their lives before they would have taken the steps on their own.
Before it's too late. Thanks, Jodi. Let's look at number 4. Your book, your memoir, The Sun Still Shines. What inspired you to write it? I mean, you've written 4 books, but this was your memoir. And what's the message? What was the message?
It was my memoir, and it was my first book I've ever written. And I'm a writer. I have been my whole life. So I thought, how hard can this be? I was so wrong. It is hard to write books, especially it being about my own journey. It felt like I was going into therapy every time I sat down at the computer. And sometimes that therapy was good. Sometimes that therapy was really hard. And I was reliving all of these experiences in my life and trying desperately to find meaning in them, because I didn't want this to be a book where you're just rehashing all of the negative, hard things in life. I wanted this to be something that was going to help people see the good, choose to be better, all of those things that we have talked about. And that was a hard place to go. And so the name, The Sun Still Shines, is based on an experience that I had when about 3.5 weeks into the hospital. From the minute I went into the hospital for my surgery, again, my life was turned upside down. I didn't know the battle that I would be facing. I hadn't stepped foot outside of the hospital. It was springtime. It had been a very dark, cloudy, rainy spring. And I'd been trapped inside one room in the neurocritical floor for weeks and weeks and weeks. And my husband was there and he said, there's a little bit of a break in the clouds. Let's get out of here. Like, he was going stir crazy. I was going stir crazy. And he went and got a wheelchair and grabbed my IV tower that has all my IVs hooked to me. And he's like, let's go for a walk. And I remember we went down the elevator and saw the exit to the hospital. And someone opened the door and I almost started to panic. And I thought, can we do this? Are we allowed? Am I allowed to leave? And he says, I don't care. We're getting out of here. And he pushed my wheelchair over the little bump and we went outside. And just he pushed me up to a little flat area that overlooked the Salt Lake City Valley, which is a beautiful, beautiful valley. The hospital is actually up on a mountain. And so we were looking down into the valley. And for a few minutes, there was a break in the clouds and the sun shone down and the warmth hit my skin. And I remember in that moment feeling, behind the clouds, the sun still shines. It is still there. No matter how dark of a storm you are in, the sun is still there shining. Sometimes you have to wait long enough to be able to see it. Sometimes you have to go in search of those places where you can find that break in the clouds. But the sun is still there. And that became this beautiful moment in my life where I realized the sun is still shining for all of us. And even at night, the sun will rise for you again the next day. But again, you have to choose to accept those moments and not see just the dark clouds. So my memoir is The Sun Still Shines, How a Brain Tumor Helped Me See the Light. And the light was that sun, as well as the sun being the higher power, as well as the light being all of those little moments in my journey that even though it was difficult, recognizing that good things were still happening, people were still coming to my aid, taking care of my family. They were surrounding me with love and with light. And yet it is a choice whether you live in that bitterness or whether you become better and acknowledge the light. So I started keeping a mental journal of what are the things of light that I'm seeing in my day. Oh, guess what? They came and drew my blood today and the guy was so good, I didn't even feel the pinprick. Or friends that came to visit, people that left notes for me online that my husband or my dad would read to me out loud. The fact that my dad was there, he lived in Hawaii, 2,000, 3,000 miles away from where I was. He left his job as a CEO and came and sat at my bedside day in and day out for more than a month so he could be with me. Those are moments of light. And we all have them, even amidst the struggles. We just have to choose to see the light.
Wow, there's a lot we're taking on board today in this 1 hour. Number 5, we were saying how to cultivate a mindset, the anti-fragile mindset. What are some practices that we can do?
I think one of the things that you have to do is you have to learn to experiment. Don't think that you've got one way of doing things and accept that that's good enough, because tomorrow your life or your business could change and that one way of doing things is no longer going to be sufficient. We all saw that during the pandemic, that the way that we've done things on a day-to-day basis for months, if not years, turned on its head and we had to reinvent. So rather than being forced into that, try to do things differently. Look for ways to experiment. Find ways to fail and know that I tried this and it didn't work. In businesses, I say fail fast and fail cheap. Try and find ways that are not going to put your bottom line too much at risk, but find ways to change things up a little bit. It's funny because recently we have a ton of road construction going on where I live. And so between my home and a building that I go to multiple times a week, I was forced to figure out new ways to get there. And you know what? I found a much better way than the way that I've been going for the last 20 years. I didn't know it was there until I was forced to look for it. So if we take on the mindset of trying things differently, not doing things the same all of the time, then we are proactively looking for ways to improve and to get better. So that's one thing. Another thing I would say is building in some redundancy. That 1 week that I planned on my calendar that people were going to come in and take care of my family, that was not enough. Build in some redundancy. We've all heard of situations in business or in life where there's one person that holds all of the knowledge or that literally holds the keys to some process. And if something happens to them, if they have to suddenly disappear, if there's a death, what happens to that process? What happens to that knowledge? Sometimes it is lost. So build in some redundancies into your life and into your business so that you are not at risk for losing that when situations change, because inevitably they will. And then maybe the other thing that I would say, and this is something I have worked very, very hard on for the last 15 years, I now call it outwork your weaknesses. They say, I don't know how many of you remember, about 20 years, 30 years ago, they started in business talking about the SWOT analysis, where you look at your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. And that's how you evaluate, it's often still used. That's how you evaluate how you move forward in business with an opportunity or a challenge that's coming your way. And they always say, well, you got to focus more on your strengths. It pays to focus on your strengths, not on your weaknesses. But there are some times where there are weaknesses that are going to stand in your way. And that was one of the things that I realized coming out of my battle is I now have deficits. And I have deficits that my strengths can't always overcome. I can't turn them into strengths. So what I realized instead was what I can do is outwork them.
Give us an example, Jodi. Give us an example of a deficit that you
Okay, so I say now the way that I look at it is you can turn those deficits, those challenges, those weaknesses, and you can camouflage them. So for example, I just had surgery 2 weeks ago because I cannot blink my eye on my own. So I have a mechanical device that looks like a safety pin that helps open and close my eye, and it has broken. They have a lifespan because it's made of metal. And so you think of blinking your eye 14,000 times a day, and that wears out. So I've also lost my depth perception. So silly things like being able to pull my car into the garage and know where to park became a real challenge. And we have to laugh about it because the only other alternative is to cry. So my husband and I got really creative, and he started by like drawing a spot on the floor, like put your tire here so that when you stop the car, here's where you know where to park. Well, that meant I had to pull in, park the car, get out, see if my tire was in the right spot, make all of these adjustments. And so we realized that wasn't quite good enough. So then he got Sharpie markers, and in the back of the garage drew a big arrow, like, okay, line your front tire up with the arrow first, and then you'll be able to pull your car into the right spot. That helped, was still not quite enough for me. And so finally, he got one of those little balls that hang from the ceiling and said, okay, when you line up your tire with the arrow, and when the windshield hits the little ball, that's when you know you've arrived in the right spot and you can park the car. My kids added to that, and now I have 2 giant orange construction cones, which we are not even going to ask where those came from. I'm not going to ask the kids how they came to have 4-foot construction cones in my garage. That's a different conversation. But now I literally have cones on either side, so I know exactly where to pull my car in. And between all of these different, devices that we have created, I can now pull my car in and not be afraid of hitting the end of the garage, hitting the wall, or hitting the car next to me. Now, that is one example, and that one is a little extreme because we had to find multiple ways to outwork that weakness. But the reality is we all have those things in our lives. And if you just work hard enough at finding a solution, a workaround, then you can camouflage what the weakness is. And another one that's an easier one to explain, I have balance issues now because of some of the deficits that I have. Well, I'm a speaker, I'm on stage. And yet if I try to stand still, the longer I try to stand still, the more I become like the Leaning Tower of Pisa. That's not a good thing. And so we've had to work really hard to find ways to overcome that. But the body needs only a little bit of help to realize that you're balanced and you're not going to fall. So if there is a podium, if there is a chair, if there's a table where I can just rest my hand on it, I don't even have to stand on it. If I can just rest my hand on it, then I can be balanced and no one in the audience knows that my head is spinning because my body is not. So find those things in your life where they might be weaknesses and brainstorm with the people who love you and with the people in your inner circle and find ways to camouflage those weaknesses.
Yeah, you're saying very good, powerful stuff here. You say you have 4 children. So what happened? How is that relationship developed through your journey? Are they inspired by you? Because I know a similar story where a person I know went through a crisis, like a very strong emotional stage in their life, where everyone came close to them and they were really all attached. And then over the period of time, everyone started doing their own things, and that person was left alone. So what kind of relationship do you have with your children, with the family?
If you had asked me at this when I started having children, what kind of children I wanted to raise, I would have said I want them to be compassionate, kind, see others in need. I want them to be independent. I want them to want to make a difference in the world. And I can tell you now, they have become all of those things, just in a very different way than I ever anticipated. Because I was not able to get them up and get them dressed and get them to school. They had to learn how to do that for themselves. And when they were up and ready to go, they often even went to school by themselves. We live only not even a mile from the school, so the kids would ride their bikes or they would get on their scooters. And then if the weather was bad, they would come and wake me up. Mom, could you give us a ride? Now, I can't tell you how many times I had feelings of guilt around the fact that my kids were the ones waking me up instead of the other way around. But I'll tell you what, my 19-year-old son could walk into any household or any business and whip it into shape because he can take charge, he can see what needs to be done, and he can find a way to do it. If he had certain things he wanted to have for breakfast, he asked me, teach me how to make this so I can make it for myself and I can make it for my siblings. And he would get up and he would be the one to do it. And at the playground, when he would go to school, they would come home and say, I saw a kid who was lonely, he was sitting by himself on the playground. And I thought of you, Mom, and the way that sometimes people treated you. And so I went over and I sat by him and I made friends with him and invited him to come and join us. Now, what parent could ask for anything more than to have a child who sees the world that way? But that's exactly what they do. And I hope I inspire them, but they also inspire me. And the other day, one of my son's friends was over at the house and they brought a new friend over. And the friend was introducing me, telling the new friend about me while I was sitting right here in my office and they were in the hall, and I overheard this conversation. And I overheard them talking about how amazing and how inspiring. And she's got this master's degree and she's won these awards and she's a champion storyteller and she and she's the most amazing person you'll ever meet. And this was coming from the young people in my house. So
yeah,
my kids are doing great. It's not that they don't have challenges, they absolutely do, but they are my biggest cheerleaders. They're also my right-hand buddies when I need an arm, when I'm not feeling well enough, or if my balance is off, they come to my aid. They're my right hand buddies, my take mom to the doctor. They're the ones driving me. But I do believe also that their lives have been changed for the better.
Wow, Matthew's got his Matthew, you got your hand up?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned bringing to the doctor, because my mom stopped driving about 2.5 years ago. Now, the funny thing is, she sold her car and then told me afterwards, which effectively turned me into a part-time taxi driver, but which is great. I get to spend time with her. I was actually arranging a paddle tennis lesson today, and I got a good laugh from the people at reception, because they asked me, what about Thursday at 11? No, mom gets her haircut at 11 o'clock on a Thursday. But what I wanted to say was, I always thought a coaching style of parenthood could be a better way to let your kids find their own way, guide them, but don't point them. Now, I talked to a friend of mine who runs an engineering business who I advise the odd time. And he said, I was talking to Rory and trying to get him to come into the business. I said, don't do that. Let him tell you what he wants to do. Don't force him in. I was forced into my dad's engineering business. I don't regret it, but maybe things would have been a little bit more aligned with my passion, which is what I'm looking for now. So I think it's about, people could learn a lot about parenting from the way your kids turned out.
I think not just about parenting, but you can apply the same things to business as well. Rather than telling someone the way to do things, ask questions. Number one, you're never wrong when you ask questions. And number two, the more curious you can get, the deeper you can understand what their motivation is. And when you understand what that motivation is, then you know why they are or are not doing something that you hope that they would do. Maybe there's a reason they're not cleaning the room. Well, find out what that reason is, get to the bottom of it, and then you can actually work through it. That the deeper you can dig, the more that you're investing in them, the more that they will see that you actually care, that you want to know what their reasons are. You're not just telling them, you are really trying to understand them. And I think that's a big thing at work as well. Instead of going into the preaching or upset that you're not doing things the way that you've been taught or that I told you to do them, well, what are the reasons for that? Ask questions, get curious. That also means you have to care enough to want to know the answers. And anytime that you care enough to want to know the answers, then you're in a stage of building the relationship, and that just puts everyone on a better platform.
When you talk about care, I mean, I have 3 children. We don't have, as parents, we don't have time all the time for them whenever they want us. But it's actually finding the moment where you sit down and say, okay, here I am, let's talk. And I think that's such a big impact. Before I used to they would talk and they was just like being bombarded, and you're trying to give them an answer, you're telling them what to do, you're trying to share, why didn't you do that, why didn't you do that? Instead, it's just like, can we talk later? And when you say, can we talk later, you actually sit down and you spend 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever it is, listen to them and see where they're coming from. And I think that's what, as parents, that's what we just have to be there as you are, Jodi, as we all are, as an inspiration to our children, not telling them what to do. Maybe they just see what we're doing and take something away from from our behavior. I think that's the goal.
As my kids went from being little to big kids, and I now have some adult children and then a couple that are still in my home, I realized the questions had to change, because how was your day is not going to elicit the kind of response that you really want. They're fine, boring, same old, same old. That's going to be the answer you get. So you have to start asking better questions too. And so rather than presenting the normal questions, it encouraged me to dig deeper within myself and ask questions that are going to really start conversations, that are going to allow them to really express themselves. And if they say something and I feel like that's not enough, tell me more about that. Help me understand that, and just keep going until you get to a level where you're having genuine conversations, as opposed to surface level, check the box, I had a conversation with my kid today. But really give them the chance to express themselves, because not all kids do that. I have, my husband is an engineer, I'll just put that out there, and I have a son who who he's not a communicator. He's a deep thinker, but he is not a talker. And so to have a conversation, I literally had to pull the answers out of this kid. So it's really taught me to ask the right questions, to be patient, and to dig deeper and ask for more information so that we can have a real conversation and not just surface level talk.
We're coming to the end, Jodi, we're coming to the end. How can people connect with you? How can people find you?
I am on most all of the social medias. I'm most active on LinkedIn, and I am also active on, Facebook and Instagram. I have a YouTube channel. So if you Google my name, you'll find all sorts of ways to connect with me. My YouTube channel is more kind of hope and inspiration for navigating the journeys of life. It has a lot more of the raw, vulnerable, like right after I had surgery 2 weeks ago, I'm posting with, my eye black and blue and my stitches and everything. And I'm telling you, this is the realities of the journey. Obviously, LinkedIn is where I'm more active in business things and giving input and hopefully adding to the conversations that are happening there. But I would love to connect with you. I would love to be able to continue some of these conversations and answering these questions. This has been a wonderful, wonderful, positive experience for me. And if I could leave you with something, I would tell you that because of some of the experiences I had in the hospital, many of them, as I mentioned, were very good and I was treated well. At other times, I was not treated well. And I quickly realized that not all people are valued in the same way. And as soon as I became ill, I realized that for some people, I was now seen as the biblical term, one of the least of these, that my worth and value was diminished in the eyes of some who could no longer see me for who I was, but saw me as a patient in a bed, a number on a door, a name on a chart. And I realized in that moment, as well as in the positive moments, that every interaction is an opportunity to change a life. And every time you come across someone, whether it's a cashier at the grocery store or a colleague that you see every day, every interaction is an opportunity. And you are going to leave them with either a negative feeling or a positive feeling, or just nothing at all. But when you invest that time and when you decide you're going to care enough, then you can become that person who is memorable and inspiring for the right reasons. And that is what I would encourage you to do.
Jodi, thank you. Thank you very much for everything, for your time. Thank you all for coming, attending. Next week, we have Anna Leverintz, and she's a quantum leap facilitator. And she's going to be talking about joyful change in action, getting into the flow. So if you guys are free and you want to come along, it's next Tuesday from 4 to 5 p.m. UTC, which is 5 to 6 CET, Central European Time. Again, thank you, Jodi. Thank you all for participating. And the video is going to be on my YouTube channel, so you can take a look there. See you next week.
Take care.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the great questions and participation.
No, thank you, Jodi. Thanks, everyone.